Greetings, gamers, and welcome to the 64th episode. Oh no, actually, that is not how we do the intro. Wow. All right, let me restart that intro real quick. It's been a second. Okay. Greetings, gamers, and welcome to the 61st live stream from the MisfitGamersStudios. I'm your host, Vortex, and this is D&D Discussions. On today's homebrew review, we have another viewer-submitted item, or actually it's a spell today, the Impenetrable Warrior. It's a second-level spell that we have from viewer Kosmycpurge, so we're going to dive into that. We had some small technical difficulties, which made us start late today. First and foremost, Kage is not going to be in the studio today. He is going to be calling in remotely, but we weren't able to get the video fixed just yet, so we will be able to hear him, but we won't be able to see him. So other than that, we're probably just going to be getting right into the item. Hopefully Cosmic, I saw him in the Discord, but I have not seen him in chat just yet. So we'll give him a couple seconds to let us know. And yeah, we will get right into this. But like I said, let me get Kage in here. At least you'll be able to hear him. Let me pull this up real quick. And there. What's up, my dude? You should be able to talk to chat now.
Hello, friends and neighbors. How's it going?
Hopefully everyone can hear you. If you guys can't hear him, if you need me to turn him up, let me know, and I can get him taken care of real quick.
I'm excited to be here, and I apologize about the technical difficulties, but we are doing our best to make it work here.
Yeah, you know, we're doing things. We're doing, you know, we're making it as best we can. I'm trying out some new stuff for my my camera setup, and I am thinking I still might mess with it a little bit more, but I'm kind of liking it. I'm trying to get it more centered on me. Hey, Cosmic, what's going on? Nice to see you in chat.
Bad. Cosmic is here. I like it. I like it. Touch. Okay.
Oh, okay. So for what we're going to be reading, you wanted to make you were considering touch instead of self, but you just didn't want the concept of touch, meaning I can touch myself and an ally to double. Is that ever? Is that ever an argument that someone has tried to make that? Because the cast is touch, you can simultaneously cast a spell twice if you can touch two people. Is that?
Like the spells generally, I feel like spells generally say whether it has to be a single target, right? Some spells say you can target multiple ones specifically, but outside of that, unless you're using something like Twin Spell, which again is worded very specifically. I actually think I just saw a video on somebody trying to finagle some weird stuff out of Twin Spell.
But the other thing too is like touch is only the range, right? Like that's only a range issue. It's not so much
but
like how many times you would cast it.
That's true.
If they're in a sorcerer with Twin Spell, Meta Magic, maybe, yeah.
Yeah. If he's trying to specifically avoid people being able to cast this on multiple people, he might have to word it creatively so that Twin Spell can't be used, right? So like you can't Twin Spell a fireball because it doesn't have a singular target and it can target multiple creatures.
So the interesting thing though is like he says that it's self up to 5 feet. I guess we'll have to read it to understand.
Read this spell. I'm curious. Yeah.
Because that's an interesting concept of self up to 5 feet, but I don't really understand how that makes sense. Because again, I don't know. Because that is a good point though. Because if something says range touch, you would think that you can do it on more than just yourself. You know, you would think that you can do it on more than yourself because it's touch. It's anything you can touch. Whereas a range of self means it's only self-inflicted. But range of self up to 5 feet piques my curiosity because I don't understand what that means.
I like it.
All right. So yeah. So let's. It sounds like audio is coming in just fine. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if we're gonna fix video while we're at it. But I have you up if we do get video fixed. And then, yeah, we should be... let us know also, Cosmic, if you're able to hear Kage okay. I turned him up just a little bit because he was kind of... felt like he was a little bit low. And then you said the intent was you and an ally next to you both get hit by an AoE attack and you have to pick up the cast spell on them or on yourself. Oh, the cast spell on them or yourself. Gotcha.
Interesting. Okay.
So yeah, I would still say that that's touch then, because touch indicates 5 feet of someone that you could touch. So that would actually still make sense. I think, yeah, I think you're definitely right. I think touch probably just would have been the better range thing. But yeah, I understand also what you mean by like someone's trying to say, well, why can't I just do it on both of us? It's like, well, you only have enough energy for one of you. Like, come on now. But I totally get that that having to like make that that adjustment. All right, so let me go ahead and pull the spell up. Baba Kiss, what is up, my dude? It's been a while since we've seen you.
Baba Kiss is in the chat. Oh my goodness.
That is fantastic. What is up? Homebrew, a crystal ball of unpleasant futures. Oh, that's rough. Just only shows unpleasant futures. That's hilarious. Let me bring this up. Here we go. Oh, it's the one time I can mute myself and not you. Because when you're in, I can only mute both of us at the same time. Let me get this pulled up here. Okay, so that looks good. All right, I think we are set. Can you see that all right on your side?
Nice. Yeah, it looks perfect.
All right. So for today's homebrew review, we have a second level evocation spell brought to us by Kosmycpurge. It is called Impenetrable Warrior. So it is going to be class locked, it looks like. So classes available to cast this spell: Druid, Sorcerer, Warlock, Wizard, and Artificer. All right, already piquing my interest with class locking. I always like it I always prefer a class lock if it has some sort of lore basis or some sort of, I don't want to say like physics, but some sort of rationale, right? Like some sort of, here's a reason behind it other than I just don't want everyone to cast it. So I'm hoping that we see something like that. Range, we were just talking about that. So it says range up to 5 feet. I get why he wanted to make the argument of not wanting to like worry too much about what people would say. But I think that what he said in chat would have been great. I think, yeah, just range of touch makes perfect sense. I think it makes all of the implications you need. And even if you wanted to put in range of touch, and then even in parentheses, if you wanted to go that one extra step, Cosmic, to just make sure that nobody can have any, have any arguments, just, range as touch, one target. Like you could just even just put that in that parenthesis of, only one target or something.
Touch or adjacent ally, maybe something like that.
Oh yeah, even range self or one adjacent ally. So you can even put or in there and then make sure that you can delineate it. So again, if you really want to like drive it home and you don't like putting it in, putting touch as the range, self or one adjacent ally might be exactly what you want. Because adjacent would imply the 5 feet that you're trying to get across. Components, we have somatical and material, but there is a special material component, so we will have to figure out what that's going to be. Casting time is 1 reaction, so it's not even an action, it is a reaction. So reaction to you or an adjacent ally receiving damage. Yeah, again, right there. So there's the adjacent ally bit. So the range of self or one adjacent ally, I think would also suffice, or just range of touch. I think both of those would work for how you want to do it. Druid is due to the material component being either a piece of wooden shield or 2-pound metal armor. It's the alternate material for the class that doesn't like using metal. Oh, I like that you're thinking of those alternatives too, of going outside of what the class would normally work with. And again, using that lore, that's really good. And then we have a duration duration is concentration up to 30 seconds, or 5 rounds. Okay. I do like this as a reaction spell too. At the top of my head,
spells are some of my favorite.
What's that?
So reaction spells are some of my favorite spells. I'm not gonna lie.
How many are above first level? Like, how many reaction spells are like of a decent level?
There are not a lot. So the ones that I know of are Shield, obviously first level. Absorb Elements, which I think is first level. And what else?
A round or a minute and every between. Yeah, I agree with you. Excuse me one sec.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how many beyond first level spells off the top of my head. I can't think of any. that would be above second level. So I'm already interested. Hellish Rebuke is a reaction spell, but what isn't Hellish Rebuke first level? Don't you get Hellish Rebuke right out the gate?
It is first level. Yeah, I think it's first level. It's either first level or a cantrip. I always get Hellish Rebuke, and there's another one. Vicious
Is that
Mockery.
Firebolt?
I get those two confused.
Or yeah, but that's the thing is I don't think there's a very many like higher level or even like beyond base level reactionary spells. So I'm already liking what we're looking at here. He makes a good point about the duration being 30 seconds or 5 rounds. There is a big overuse between one round or 1 minute. So this kind of breaks that little area that mid area. Okay, so far it's looking pretty good. I don't see anything that strikes me as odd or I mean it's coming from Cosmic, so everything's gonna be well thought out. But it doesn't strike me as out of place so far. And I do like that, looking at the class types, the sorcerer, the warlock, the wizard, the artificer, they all kind of come into the same arena. But I do like that he has that lore bit for the druid because there's going to be an alternate material component that we'll get into.
Got you. Very cool.
Let's see. And then as a tiefling, it can use it once per day for free as a racial ability, and it's used as a second level.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So let's see here. So the description. So when you or an adjacent ally gets hit by an attack from a creature you can see, so any attack, you can use your reaction to roll 2d4 and subtract the result from the damage taken. Okay. Damage cannot be reduced below 1 by this effect. The concentration DC is based on the reduced damage total. At higher levels, when you cast the spell using a spell slot of 3rd level or higher, the damage reduction increases by 2d4 for each spell slot level above 2nd. Note, the spell's effect does not stack with other damage reduction-like effects, such as resistances, successful saving throws, feats like Uncanny Dodge or Evasion, or other spell effects, including itself, if from another additional source. So, interesting. So this is in reaction to you or an ally adjacent to you taking damage from an attack. Now, it does not state melee. It does not, so it's any kind of attack. So this can be an attack spell. This could be a melee attack. Could be a ranged attack. So any attack that lands, you can use this reaction. Except if there's... So I'm trying to think of like how this would play into if you have, say, like what he was saying here. Like, let's say if I have Uncanny Dodge, right? So is it saying that one or the other stacks? So if my character has Uncanny Dodge, but let's say Cosmic's character who is standing next to me, I take damage, he uses this ability to negate the damage, I would no longer then be able to use my Uncanny Dodge? Or do I get, I guess, because it's his reaction, so I wouldn't get the choice.
I think the note says it does stack.
Oh, did I misread that? The spell's effect... Oh, I misread that. The spell's effect does stack with other damage reductions. Okay, it's just that this spell can't reduce it by 1.
The question would be, which one of the effects goes off first? Because if you are using something like Uncanny Dodge to halve the damage, if you reduce the damage first, then the halved amount is going to be less than it would be if you halved it first. So the question would be, do you have it first or do you reduce the damage first?
So this comes down to it's so funny. We always talk about action economy. We always use that phrase of action economy, but it means so many different things. And in this particular case, it would come down to what I like to call like Magic the Gathering rules of order of operations, right? What was put down first? It's kind of like an interrupt spell, right?
What hit you back first?
Right. So if the attack goes off, this doesn't trigger until I get hit, but so does all of my other stuff. But if you look at it from the, I guess you would have to make the decision of when the person makes the reaction, does that count as an interrupt, right? So enemy A attacks me. I take damage. Let's call it 10 damage. I have an ability to reduce that to half. However, upon taking damage, I could reduce it to half. However, someone else's reaction will also trigger upon me taking damage. So it really comes down to how does that all work? Now, depending on the DM, this would all depend on how you as a DM would do it. But in my thought process, that's why I call it the Magic the Gathering rule, because if you look at it like cards, enemy A throws down the damage card and I get damage taken. Naturally, I'm going to throw down my card in order because that's what I would do. However, in between that, I feel this like an interrupt would happen and go, before my ally takes full damage and before he can react to that damage, I'm going to come in with this reaction of Impenetrable Warrior. I'm going to come in and reduce the damage by 2d4. And then once I've interrupted that, then he can do his uncanny dodge or whatever to reduce it then further by half. So I would say that's how I logically look at it. Is it's kind of like a card game. I know what my turn is after I get hit, but I look at this as another person's reaction is kind of like them trying to interrupt mine.
Interesting note, both uncanny dodge and this are a reaction.
Yes.
So the only way for both of those to stack is for the person adjacent to the caster to be using uncanny dodge. So in the scenario you just gave. So in that situation, since they're both reactions, which means they're both happening not on the person's turn, is it just based upon in the game whoever spoke up first? Or are you specifically saying that the spell would always happen before the physical reaction?
So and that's really difficult because again, I look at it, if you just looked at it just bare bones naturally, my instinct would be to look at the operation of the person being attacked has an obvious reaction, right? It's going to happen, right? Kind of like a game of cards. I get attacked, I'm going to react to being attacked. But then I would look at this other one as like an interrupt option, right? Because it's further reducing the damage being taken. However, you could also put it into a case of who has the higher initiative just in that round, regardless of what initiative it is. If you could say who of you has the higher initiative, or you could use there's an older, I don't think 5th edition has it, but like in High Point we have a reaction. I have that reaction stat, and that it's for things like this. It would be specifically like, okay, which one of you reacts quicker, and that's the die you have to roll. So I definitely say that there could be
like area modifier kind of plays that role, which is exactly what you're talking about when it comes to your initiative bonus and stuff like that.
Yeah, and of course the reason why, Cosmic makes a good point. He says that he thinks the spell should take over the feat because it's using a resource like being a spell slot. That's a good mechanical explanation. I also look at it from the point of view of I have to physically be hit in order, and then I'm going to physically react. But again, with High Point, the way I look at magic is also a little bit faster. Now you could say that me being hit, how is someone else going to react faster because they didn't see, they have to see me get hit where I have to feel it. Like there's a lot of different arguments on both sides, but that's why I kind of just default to like
the scenario we brought up a second ago. What if we said that it wasn't one person getting attacked, but what if we said that both of those characters were in the middle of a fireball when it happened?
So in that particular case,
being attacked.
See, I actually, you know what? That's actually a really interesting point because let me look something up here. I want to take a look at something real quick because I don't know if there's an official ruling in the book about multiple reactions simultaneously taking place.
That is a fair point. I feel like that likely would have come up. There might be like a Crawford ruling or something on that.
There's got to be somewhere someone's talked about it. So let me see if I can fish it. Yeah, because that's really interesting because I've never. Well, I think when I've run into it, it's usually been in the moment, it's kind of like what you described of whoever spoke up first. It's more of a I attack. Oh, well, I have this resistance. Oh, well, I have this. And then it's like, oh, well, I have this. Kind of like a game of an actual card game.
Right.
It's whoever throws the card
Right.
down. I think I just default to the idea that, you know, the person who has to react with like the feet, they're the last to react just because it's their physical reaction, but the other things are happening around them to like help reduce what they have to react to. But again, there's so many different ways that in the moment I would be open as a DM to argument, or at least to, you know, discussion of what should take place, because I don't think there is a good hard ruling here. So let's see. So here's one that no general ruling allows you to insert a bonus action between attacks and a single action. You can interrupt a multiple attack action with a bonus action. No, no, that's not what I wanted. I need to how to resolve multiple. I mean, this is talking about readied actions.
I can't believe I didn't think about this. Counter spell is a reaction spell. It's one of the most popular reaction spells.
Right. Okay. So yeah, because that's that's a good point, right? Because you would normally say that if someone's casting a magic spell and if it hits, you can then decide to cast that, right? Like as a reaction, right? So, and then that would kind of undo it. Kind of, in a sense, you could think about it mechanically as it retcons it, because you wouldn't cast it. I don't know. Actually, because if someone casts a spell, can you wait to cast counterspell until you know it hits? Or do you have to, like, I don't know. I guess that's a home ruling, right? That would be more of like a home rule.
That's an interesting question. I don't know if I've ever been asked that before. Do you have to check if it hits before you counterspell?
Because if I just say, you know, if the DM's saying, hey, enemy is starting to cast a spell and it seems like he's going to target you, or he says, hey, he casts fireball, do you have to say before they roll and say what their AC is? Do you have to like call up, or can you be like, oh, is he going to make it? Nope. Oh, okay. Now I want to kick that back, right?
I would say in a lot of other circumstances in D&D, the way that I've seen it presented is you wait to see if you're gonna get hit. Like when it comes to shield, right? When it comes to shield, if you get hit, then you pop up your shield, right? If it's gonna hurt you, then you pop up your shield. In counterspell,
there's a real rule.
Is there?
There is a real ruling on this officially. It's in Xanther's Guide to Everything. On Xanther's Guide to Everything, page 77, simultaneous effects. In rare cases, effects can happen at the same time, especially at the start or end of a creature's turn. If two or more things happen at the same time on a character or monster's turn, the person at the game table, whether player or DM, who controls that creature decides the order in which those things happen.
Controls which creature?
Who controls the creature? So so I would say, I mean, the person who's having multiple effects happen on them, that person who's in control of that. So if multiple effects are happening on an enemy creature, it's the DM. If multiple effects are happening on a player, it's the player. That's Xanther's Guide officially of what they say. So they say officially that you can technically, in this particular case, I being the person being targeted, if Cosmic threw this spell on me as a reaction, I would get to choose whether or not to take the 2d4 first or have the damage and then take the 2d4. If I'm reading this correctly.
I like that.
Because then you're more strategic about it. I mean, it's kind of weird because it's like, it's a very strange ruling, right? Because in reality, you wouldn't have that choice. It would be more or less, I think even I might even make a ruling of more or less what makes the most sense to have happened. Like, because this is a spell, you can make a lot of like differences. But in my opinion, if it's like let's say someone's making a melee attack on you. Let's say that this was specific to a melee attack and it's a feat that you can use to, let's say you're holding a shield and an ally adjacent to you would take damage. You could block a quarter of the damage with your shield, right? In my opinion, that wouldn't be arguable as what comes first. The shield comes first to block the rest of the damage, part of the damage that comes the rest of it in, and then your feat of uncanny dodge would happen. I don't think the character in that situation makes sense to say, no, I do uncanny dodge and then the shield blocks it. Like, if it went past the shield, it would have hit you at full damage. You know what I mean? Like, in that case, it doesn't make sense to say that the shield came second. But in this particular case, because these are reactionary spells, and because it's a reaction, and because they're happening simultaneously, I guess you could say that, yeah, it would. I would say that I would rule with the book. It would be on the character. So if the character has uncanny dodge and someone casts this on them, they would have to choose which happens first.
Just as a side note,
I kind of agree with Bobicus, though.
Agree with Bobicus's interpretation of counterspell specifically, because of the way that the spell is worded. Especially reading the first line, it says you attempt to interrupt a creature in the process of casting a spell.
So good point.
Way more sense.
That's a good point. Yeah, you can't wait
before the spell hits or not. I'm trying to stop you from even casting it in the first place, not try and prevent it from hitting a target.
No, that's 100% true. Yeah, you're trying to stop the spell altogether. That's correct. Yeah. All right. So yeah. So with this, So I don't think the note about having them stack is a problem. We already have a good book ruling. We don't need to worry about what would happen. So, not seeing anything else here. Yeah, so I think that that's good. I think that it does belong to stack. So I think that was a good call, Cosmic, to allow this to stack with other options. So I want to read the rest of it before I fully circle back to this. But my only hesitation so far is at second level, upping the spell basically. It doesn't double it every time, but adding 2d4 for every increase. I don't know, because at second level, right, you get 2d4, which technically would mean that the first level version would be a 1d4. So to say that going from 2 to 3 is another 2d4, I'm just like, does it make more sense to say that for every level you upcast, it goes up by 1d4? That's my only question in terms of like the logic and the math behind it. But otherwise, I mean, we're talking about 2d4. It's not a lot of damage, so it's not like a lot of reduction, especially later. Like, this is much more of an early game spell, because we're talking about 8 points of damage. Early game is tremendous in battle. When you're level 10, who cares about 8 points, right? Like, 8 points is not going to change this tide of battle for this. 1dx is too overdone, and there is no level 1 version. I mean, that's fair. As I say, like the math would just track better, but it is a d4.
There's a different type of scaling that I was thinking about outside of damage scaling. I was actually thinking, because here's another point that I might want to clarify, because this is a concentration spell that lasts for 30 seconds, but it's also a reaction. So the question is, do I, for the next 30 seconds, without expending an additional spell slot, have on my turn the option to reactivate this reaction for the next 30 seconds? Or do I just have 30 seconds to use this reaction?
So I read it, and we'll wait for Cosmic to actually answer that, but I read it as you cast this spell, and for the next 5 rounds, if you or an ally get hit, this can trigger at your will. So you have to have cast this in preparation for it. It's not, because I don't know. It does say casting time is 1. Well, it is a reaction though. So it is a reaction spell.
Yeah.
So I don't, that doesn't really make much sense. How do you react to something instantaneously, but then have to concentrate for 5 more rounds? Like, does that mean that you cast it as a reaction to instantly do it, and then like Kage said, for 5 more rounds you can continuously do this every round? Because that's a lot. That's good, but that's a lot.
Available. I think that's cool, and that's what I think should be scaled. So instead of it lasting for 30 seconds, once you cast it at higher levels, maybe it'll last for a minute. Maybe it'll last for a little bit longer. Like, that could be a different way to scale it that makes it but then that could get crazy if that thing lasts for like an hour or like 2 hours.
Exactly. But I mean, again, it's only blocking d4s. And again, so it's like, so basically you're in combat, right? You're in combat, and your buddy, like you're halfway through combat, right? So it's like your lower levels, you have 20 hit points total, you get down to like 9 hit points. You're pretty low. Guy comes in, tries to hit you. I cast this. So he hits you for 5. I negate all but 1. 2d4. He hits you for 5. Let's say I negate all but 1. That's pretty clutch in that moment. But I can't do that again until the next round. Now I can do that for 4 more rounds because it's a total of 5 rounds, right? So I use it in this round, and I'm assuming for 4 more rounds after that, unless Cosmic's intention is 6. But I think it's total of 5 times. So I might be able to do this 5 times, but I can only use it on myself or on you when we get hit. And I can only use it once per round if I haven't done something else as a reaction. So actually, yeah, that's not too bad. I mean, even being able to do it for multiple rounds doesn't sound that bad. It's definitely kind of a very defensive maneuver. It's very much a when you're fighting with your crew really close together. So on the player's handbook
says
resistance and then vulnerability are applied after all other modifiers are damaged. For example, a creature has resistance to bludgeoning and is hit by an attack that deals 25 bludgeoning damage. The creature is also within a magical aura that reduces all damage by 5. The 25 damage is first reduced by 5, then halved, so the creature takes 10 damage. Multiplied, multiple instances of resistance or vulnerability that affect the same damage type count as only 1 instance. Yeah, I remember the 1 instance thing. So in this particular case, interesting.
See, they're specifically talking about resistances and vulnerabilities there. I'm curious if that would also apply to something like Uncanny Dodge.
This is different though, because this is things that you like. Resistance wouldn't be the same thing as a feat that you have. So I think the idea is when there's multiple reactions happening on you and multiple effects happening, I think that's the case when you can do multiples. This is a case where, if it's like, if the type of damage is what you're trying to reduce, then this rule would apply. But in that particular case, it wasn't so much their resistance as it was a feat that they could apply to it. So yeah, it's interesting because and that's the other downside with having so many rule books.
Because I do agree with Bobicus. Like, if you were to do something like the Goliath has the ability to just reduce incoming damage as like a racial feature, right? But if that Goliath was also had resistances to certain damage, because like of a ring of resistance or something, right? I would say that reduction in damage would happen first, and then the resistance would apply. That would make sense, and that's what I think Bobicus is referring to.
No, absolutely, and I 100% agree with that, because that one totally makes sense, especially in the order that you would expect it to happen in, right? Because you're in the magic aura, that's first.
If that same Goliath was a rogue, I do think that your rule that you found in the other book would apply, because then he could use his racial feature to reduce damage and then use Uncanny Dodge afterwards, or he could Uncanny Dodge first and then only whatever's left to use his racial feature on. I think that should be possible, especially because the character would control both of those. Now, in this situation, when it comes to the spell, I think you can still use the ruling you were talking about.
Xanther's Guide. Well, and that's the thing too, is because you can pick apart these situations like we do, that's why you're going to get those they're not, I don't want to say one-off rulings, but you're going to get those rulings that fall into those gray areas, because one ruling says, well, it's resistances and then vulnerabilities, but then people probably brought up the fact of, well, that's not the same as a reaction spell, so how does that's not a resistance or a vulnerability. So I can see that where they have to build off of it, but that's the other part about not having all of the resources at your hand at hand, is like, or having them all memorized. How do you know what ruling actually applies to each time? So yeah, I think this one is definitely in cases like this, I mean, yeah, you could go with the player's handbook. You can go try to find other resources like Xanther's Guide. Or again, I always like to go with the rule of, especially when it comes down to like what's happening in combat, what makes sense, right?
Yes, very
Like
much
those
so.
are the kind of things that I would look at in terms of, again, if a physical shield is supposed to stop a blow from doing more damage, the shield should come first, right? Because it makes sense that the shield would be glancing some of the force and that it doesn't cut you as much or something, right? That's those kind of situations I think
Hmm.
could make more sense. And then in cases like this, I would say, like, if you don't like either of the rulings that we've said, do the thing where it's like, okay, well, who's faster in initiative? That's technically the fastest person in this round, so that person's reaction goes first. Or, have them roll for it and just say whose goes first because who was faster, right? There's so many ways around it. Because I agree, like, as much as I kind of agree with the rule sets, they're not 100% clear. And there's probably even more rulings than
Yeah.
that, to nitpick this even further. Um, and then thinking having is supposed to be after reduction, and that I would say that too is also I think I don't want to say a rule of thumb, but I think that sounds right too when you're talking about if you're going to have something versus reduce it by a certain number. I always think that you should take down the max first, then do the math, right? So, or I don't want to say math, but the percentages, right?
Hmm.
So if something's going to go in half or by a quarter, that's going to come off the total. I think the total should be reduced first by static numbers, and then you do the actual percentages. I think that works too. So yeah, going back to this, going up by 2d4. I mean, it is only 2d4, and again, at lower levels, it's really good. It also does help at higher levels. It doesn't make this so. Kind of almost not going back on what I said, because it does. My brain says the math doesn't math right when it's 2d4 from at third level, but it also makes sense in terms of scaling this to make it worth it later down the road, because there are a lot of times where we see these low level spells and they're basically like abandonable spells. By the time you're level 10, you're never going to
Hmm.
touch it again.
Yeah,
And I
that does
hate
suck.
those spells.
Especially when you're a wizard that has to pay for those spells. You gotta pay to put that spell in your spell book, right? Like that's hard. Like wizard, or I'm sorry, sorcerers and like druids just get spells, and so you can use it or not use it. But when you have to like pay to get that stuff, or you have to work to get it, it kind of sucks when it's no good.
Yeah. Um, and so that's where I think that this actually does fit better doing a 2d4, because if I'm going to cast this at
I can
say
do that.
6th level, um if I can upcast this up to 6th level, we're now talking about like 8d4, 10d4 at that point, right? So 10d4 could be really shit, but that's also up to 40 hit points right there. And if I'm upcasting by level 6, I'm gonna need all those hit points, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
I think that it makes it a second level spell worth casting when you're casting 6th level spells, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I can totally see that. I'm really not mad at it. I think it's actually pretty legit.
I agree with Bobby Kiss too. Applying this to attacks and not just damage was I think pertinent. I really like that this is hit by attack and not just takes damage. Um, Hit with a breath weapon. Well, because this is
What
kind of
does?
like a spell, I assume that it's just a magical reduction in magic. It's kind of almost like a yeah. I mean, it's just a magical reduction. So I think it should count for a breath weapon because that's still technically an attack.
I'd say
2d4
so.
does next to nothing, even if you roll max amount. If a CR plus 15 is hitting for 60 plus damage, 2d4 ain't gonna do shit. Yeah, 2d4 won't do shit, and that's what the point I was making is once you can get to, if you're casting this at 6th level, you're getting 10d4. That's up to 40 hit points for a 60. When you're getting attacked for 60, getting 40 back isn't bad, especially for a reaction, right? Where I mean, because that's the other thing too is we got to remember this is just a reactionary spell, right? This isn't a spell that you're going to be holding on to and waiting to cast at the right time. This is just something that's nice to have in your back pocket. In a clutch or even early on, just so you can kind of get ahead in a encounter.
To be fair to Babakis, he's making a point that says pit fiends do less than 20 attack damage. The average for them is 20, 22. One of their claw attacks are 17. But I will say they do have multi-attacks, and they can make 4 attacks per turn.
Yeah, and it would
So
only...
that 20 damage is also being multiplied by 4.
That's fair, yeah.
We use 1 reaction, so one of those 20s will get reduced, and then all of the other ones won't.
Yeah.
Because you can only use this on one instance of taking damage, and when you split it up like that, you just
Yeah,
gotta
multi-attack would... Yeah, multi-attack really would be its bane.
Yeah.
I still like it, though. I still think being able to reduce that much damage as a reaction, I think it makes sense, especially being able to hold on to it.
That's why I think it's balanced. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, it's not going to be something that, because again, you don't want to have something that it's like once you see it, you're like, oh, I'm never letting this spell go again, right? Like this is one that you could keep in your spell book, pull out every now and again in the right, in the right instance, but at the same time, it's not one that you're just going to abandon the moment you find something better.
Right. Which is nice to actually get to, feel like you get to use it for a little bit.
Are breath weapons not considered an attack? Is that just because it's AoE? Is it just AoE damage, so they're not technically considered an attack?
I would say... So usually when people are talking about an attack, they're talking about being attacked, which means that you're being targeted. Breath weapons don't target, just like Fireball doesn't target. So it's are you just in the area of where damage is happening, or are you being attacked? I think that's kind of the separation of what they're referring to. And so the way I thought it read is upon receiving damage. Right? So like, if I damage because of something, because of whatever, then I can use this, right? But if it's specifically being attacked, then I would say that might lend it to being something that requires you to be targeted.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I know... So, because it's interesting, because yes, so breath weapon is not technically an attack. It doesn't make an attack roll, so it doesn't technically count. But at the same time, again, this is where you get into real weird D&D logic. Breath weapon is an attack action. It's on the... If you look at, again, the way that combat works, it is on the attack action stage, right? The action step.
Yes.
So it's interesting. So it's an attack action, but it does not make an attack. It does not target someone for an attack, and it does not use the verbiage of attack. So it's one of those things where I can understand that there are arguments on both sides, but it really, see, this is one of those cases where, again, it's one of those rule sets where I don't think this rule makes sense to like try to tell everyone how it's supposed to work, because it depends on how your consistency is with your other rule sets, right? Like if you are very much about, like if you've made other rulings where it says, no, these are the words and these words negate it, then you have to admit this is not an attack. You would have to say, no, it does not have the attack word there. Because if that's the way that you book it, right? If that's the way you say, hey, look at how it says it. Yes, this is the word it used. So if that's the way that you are as a DM and you say, hey, by the book, it is the letter of it, then it wouldn't work because breath weapon is not an attack. But if you've made other rulings that are more conceptual, if you've made other rulings of no, I'm going to let that slide because it makes more sense conceptually on how magic works, then you could say, well, technically it is an attack being made upon a person. But you would have to remember, you have to be consistent, so you'd have to expand that to all other situations that are ambiguous with the word attack. Any other time it says attack, you have to assume that it's you are taking damage from an intentional source. Because, again, that's the difference, right? There's the attack action. The action or the spell says it's attacking you versus there is an intent to do you harm, right? How do you look at how you need to...
How would you rule that when it comes to something like a trap, right? That's not coming from a person. That's not coming from a source.
And I don't know any trap. I don't know any trap by the book or otherwise that would be considered an attack. I would never consider a trap an attack. because it doesn't. Because again, it's
when if like say you had a trap that went off that was shooting arrows, would you roll an attack roll at your party member?
That is a fantastic question because I've had a hard time with that making dungeons my entire DMing like career. Bro, you have no idea how much that single question has plagued me dealing with dungeons. Not specifically the attack roll portion, but the concept of why does a stationary like directional thing roll against your AC when it's not aiming, right? And that's what always plagued me because it does still make sense, right? Your AC is more than just your armor, right? It's if you've triggered it, I've set it up to where it's gonna shoot the person that triggered it because I know where you're gonna be standing. So I get it because AC takes into account your reactionary speed and it takes into account more. But conceptually though, it bugs me because it's not an intentional attack. It's a triggered effect. It's like saying that there was a rock slide nearby, but a rock slide wouldn't make an attack roll, right? But I know it's a semantic that I have yet to ever resolve personally, but it literally irks me because both arguments don't make any sense. But seriously, so, like I think that's along the same lines of I think this ruling is all about consistency. If you were very much about the wording, you have to admit like breath weapon wouldn't be it. But if you've been more about conceptualism, then I hope that you have a lot of other rule changes. But yeah, so far I'm liking it. Like I think it makes sense. I think it still makes sense. On the same note, can an arrow trap be countered with a monk's deflect missile ability? I'd have to read the verbiage of deflect missile again.
I would honestly say yes, it works. Even though in the scenario you're talking about, even though it's very much overused when it comes to traps and stuff, because of that, that's why I use things like saving throws rather than.
I like saving throws, kind of. I mean, it's so funny that you say overused, but at the same time, like if it's overused, there's also a point of maybe it's because it works.
And because it makes the most sense. Just think about how often in our lives we use dexterity. How often in our lives it's constant. Anytime you walk, anytime you do most things, there's some form of dexterity involved. It's like one of the primary stats that we use for all things. But when it comes to like strength, people can get away with not using strength for a really long time. People can get away with avoiding strength-based activities and things of that nature, using other tools to help compensate for that. And so a lot of the times those things you don't make nearly as many of those, right? So I get why it's air quotes overused, but it does kind of suck when you want to build a character that's like good at other things and you want to use maybe Dex as your dumb stat, but everything uses freaking Dex, man. That's like suicide having Dex as a dumb stat. I mean, not really, but lightweight.
Interesting. So technically the monk's deflect missile does not require the monk to even see the attack coming. So I would say, yeah, it could do it on a trap because it just has to be hit with a ranged weapon attack. And again, I know this is where we were talking about, does a trap consist of an attack? Now, again, it's the whole thing of like intent, right? Like, is it intentional? A trap is intended to do you harm. The trigger is not intending to do you harm. Like the trap itself has no intent. But that's where it's one of those just, again, it's so just pedantic to argue about that. But yeah, I would say that the deflect missile absolutely does. Because if you don't even have to see the attack, all it has to be is a ranged attack that hits you. I 100% believe that the monk would just always be able to do it. Based on that. Let's see here. So they got the class using the spell and how cleric isn't listed, yet Shrine Maiden clerics can. Only Shrine Maiden clerics can use the spell as it's given them the subclass itself. Any other cleric cannot use a spell, similar to how warlocks get different spells based on their patron or pact. Okay, so this is locked to other clerics except for the Shrine Maiden, which makes sense because it's the only cleric that can use it.
Yeah.
And that makes sense because especially if it's given part of the subclass, I do like that. It kind of makes it more of like that god's will that makes this thing happen. So that's kind of cool. Okay,
Right.
so we did say that there was a special material component all about this. So the material
Yes.
component, a piece of wooden shield or a fragment of metal armor weighing at least 2 pounds, which the spell consumes. Ooh, that's more interesting. The wood completely disappears, whereas the metal corrodes and oxidizes into fine oxidized metal powder, which I know, talking with Cosmic before, he likes alchemy and likes to mess with things. So I believe he specifically designed that to, once it corrodes, it becomes something else useful. So I do find this interesting too, because it's not just like usable. I mean, 2 pounds isn't a lot, but depending on how you and your DMs do encumbrance, that could be a very big limiting factor on how often you can use this. Because it has to be,
True.
wooden shield, metal armor,
Very
probably not
true.
hard things to get a hold of.
Interesting. I'm curious. So,
Oh, we just talked about this,
this
Shrine Maidens.
oxidized. Um. Oh yeah. So I forgot that he actually created a stat block for this powder
Oh, okay.
and kind of what you can do with it. I think I included that in there.
Okay. Um, so yeah, so this is basically so that's what it is. Okay, so and then here's their part: clerics of the Shrine Maiden subclass, the homebrew class that he hopefully will submit to us in the future. Gain access to the spell at 3rd level. When the Shrine Maiden cleric casts the spell, the required amount of the components is reduced from 2 pounds of wood or metal down to 1 cubic inch of the same material. So they get a little bit of a boost to it. And he already mentioned before that it's wood or metal because the wood allows for the druids to be able to cast this. And wanted to make a spell that did damage reduction without granting buffs like resistance. Also wanted to make a spell whose material components are, when consumed, converts the material into components for another spell, which I figured when I have Impenetrable Warrior do both. So that's why I reworked it with the OG, like the version. I like that. I think that that's a little bit more more creative in terms of having a progressive process, because you've done this before with like the Shield of Inversion, where you have these multiple things that you can do with it and you kind of have to plan ahead, right? So knowing that this using your
Right.
metals is going to turn into an oxidizable powder that you can then use for something else is a good mechanic to put forward to people, just to kind of help them plan out their gameplay more. And I would almost go maybe even one step further, and making it like, I don't know. The lore is good with a shield or metal armor, but I mean, weighing at least 2 pounds, that's a pretty, depending on the DMs that do encumbrance, that could hurt a lot in terms of this. But then again, if you're in the middle of a fight, you could just walk over and pick up someone's, shield, break off a piece, and then there you go. So I guess it really wouldn't be that difficult.
Question. Uh, if this is your own armor that you ended up using, at what point does it reduce your AC?
Well, it's only a fragment of metal armor weighing 2 pounds. So I don't think it would be your own armor.
Right.
But you mean like if you were to just like sit there and like break off pieces of
Say
your own
you
armor to do it?
cast the spell. Well, does it have to be a broken piece? Or say I don't have any armor. Say I'm in an emergency situation and I want to cast this, and I just use a piece of my armor. Like, I imagine casting this and just a piece of my own armor just starts corroding off of me. Because, I'm trying to save somebody. They're about to die. They're about to blow up to a whatever.
I would say
honestly,
honestly, I would say in my opinion, it would be pretty instantaneous, like that you would start to lose some sort of AC. I mean, if it's a shield, I would say you lose 1 AC. I would say if it's armor, I would say, yeah, I would say for every 2 pounds, I mean, armor's heavy, but it's also distributed. So it's like, I would say if for every 2 pounds, you're probably losing at least 1 or 2 AC. And after, I would even have it like exacerbate. So like the first time it's 1 AC, the second time it's 2 more AC. So now you're at 3. The third time it would be another 3 AC. So now you're up to 5 AC loss. I would absolutely think that it should exponentially grow, because again, not just that piece is gone, so you're exposed, but the balance is off, so you can't move as well. It could, damage straps. It could be loose now. There's a lot of factors. So yeah, if it would be allowed to, in an emergency, cast this and consume whatever you're wearing, I would absolutely apply a reduction in AC for the time being.
Yeah, I would even have like a cap on how much you could use it. You could probably use it like 4 times on medium armor, maybe 5 times on heavy, 5 or 6 times on heavy or something like that. And just be like, once it gets so corroded, you just can't effectively wear that armor anymore. I also think it'd be really interesting to have, like, say there was like one of the old original Shrine Maidens who like first discovered how to use this, had some like special armor that they were able to keep casting it over and over again on this armor until the whole thing was corroded, but they still wore it. And so there's this old ancient piece of like corroded magical armor that like you could basically, wearing this, it negates the need for the material components, and you could just cast it with this. I don't know. I think that idea is interesting. Just
So
lore wise,
here's something that I want to throw at you, Cosmic. I think that this would be a cool thing, because I do like that you have the Shrine Maidens have, basically, you've just basically said, hey, don't worry about the material cost. You're like 1 cubic inch, like who cares? I would almost say, I would almost want to give the Shrine Maiden the ability to wear. It's either like either this, where you give it to them in a small amount, or when they cast it, it would be great if they could consume a piece of armor from an enemy within like 10 feet of them to do this, right?
Ooh, kind of
like maybe okay. Like a super, like maybe after being upcast to a certain level, they can literally take, like, they could destroy a wooden shield that an enemy is carrying or something to cast this spell. I don't know.
I kind of like that ability.
But only if it's upcast, right? Because it's still level 2. You don't want that to just be every Shrine Maiden just sits there and just destroys everyone's armor every single time they attack and do damage. But like at a certain upcast, for that 5 rounds, because imagine that for 5 rounds.
Or something like that.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm just imagining for 5 rounds, every round you try to go and attack that person or someone near them, and like part of your armor just dissolves, and you're just like, what the
You're reducing their armor and reducing their damage. It's just like,
bro, simultaneously reducing their armor and their damage. And I think that would fit in. Only Shrine Maidens could do it, and only after upcast to a certain level. That way it stays special to the Shrine Maidens, but it gives them specifically a little more, because again, Cosmic said, they get this as a subclass feature.
You can be a Shrine Maiden class feature. Like at a certain level, the spell enables you to like do X, Y, and Z with it.
Yeah, because they automatically get it at 3rd level. So I would say that, maybe like, I don't know. I just think it would be kind of cool, because I think the Shrine Maidens deserve a little tiny more than just the reduction in the weight. Just because, again, when I think of a deity bestowing something like this onto his people, I always look for not like game changing differences, but something that really like everybody could see this, be used, but then seeing someone do that and then the enemy shield crumble like on the battlefield would, like, in my mind, it's kind of like that anime moment where everyone like does like the camera pan around and everyone's looking over, realizing, that's who that is. Like, that could be the moment that they all realize that they're dealing with a shield maiden or a Shrine Maiden, because someone kind of tries to go in and do an attack, shield maiden or Shrine Maiden just comes in, stops the attack, and then the shield just disintegrates. Like, that would just be such a bold move and so cool and cinematic that I think that would be deserving for them to be able to do something just a little bit more. You don't have permissions? Wait, whoa. Hey, Kage, can you look into this? Babakis says he does not have permission to post in submissions.
Missions to post into submissions. Yeah, let me fix that.
I don't know if he has just the wrong role right now.
Yep. Some reason he got put in as a viewer and not a.
Oh, you know what? That probably changed when we did the onboarding changeover. I think a couple people got changed up. Yeah, go ahead and let us know if you still have that issue, Babakis. That should be fixed here very shortly. All right, so yeah, so I really like that though. I really do think that not just consuming it, but being able to turn it into something else. That is a mechanic I would love to see D&D work more with, like as a baseline. I would like to see like the shatter spell that has the piece of mica. I don't like the fact that the mica doesn't like slowly chip away like flint and steel would. So it's like having something like that to where it's like after so many uses, the material component will shatter. And again, it's one of those things where it's like, if you don't pay attention and you don't want to, it's fine. But if you do pay attention to the rules, maybe that piece of mica shatters and into a fine dust. And then that dust mixed with a health potion could do something, right? And
I love that concept of like just leftovers being useful for stuff.
Exactly. There's so many spells out there that have these components, but half the time, I mean, again, I had this conversation, I think, with you previously. Oh, no, not with you. I don't know if you got to watch last week's when you weren't here. I don't know if you got to watch my episode of Fixing Foci, but I talked about this, where the biggest problem... What's up?
No, I say go ahead. I didn't finish that episode.
Yeah, and I was just talking about how like components are kind of just there for show, right? Like not like unless it's a really powerful spell, for the most part, the components don't matter. You can have a component belt, a component pouch. You can have a focus that basically says, "Hey, don't worry about your material component," right? Like you have all of that stuff, so you basically are already telling us that the material components don't matter. It's kind of like points in whose line is it anyway. It's like they're there, but they don't matter. And and so what I'm thinking is, why not make it to where you can have I don't want to say simple, but have like a table of byproducts, right? Of, hey, after 10 uses of shatter, a mica, again, just alternative, right? Just an alternative book of alternative, spell component rules. And it could be just a list of, hey, this, after 10 uses, a piece of mica, and it's any 10 uses, right? Because I don't know if there's more spells that use like a piece of mica. I just know shatter off the top of my head. Right. But, it's just, the book just says, hey, a piece of mica used for all of these spells after 10 uses turns into a fine powder and can be mixed with the following to create the following, right? And that's just it. These are just optional rules, and all it does is just list a lot of the most prominent and special items, and they just say, hey, after this many uses with this list of spells, or this many uses with this list of spells, depending on, if the component's like really popular, this is what it will turn into, and this is what it can be. And it doesn't have to always be great and fantastical, right? Maybe just one thing can just turn into a component that's something super mundane, but it just does, right? Or it can turn into something that is a very rare material and you need a shit ton of it to cast a super powerful spell.
Right.
Like just those things could just be just really, really interesting, right? Hell, you can even get into some really interesting stuff where, like, because I know a lot of DMs out there who've taken different approaches to how to limit magic in their worlds, whether to get rid of it completely, to remove deities, to just say, magic isn't as powerful, and so just making it more rare that not as many people have it, and it doesn't do like what all of the Dungeons and Dragons stuff says it does. But having something like this to where you could lock super powerful spells away by needing to have cast other spells, or even spell progression could be this way, right? To cast a higher level spell, you need to cast a certain spell so many times to get the material component that will then be able to cast the next spell.
Imagine, how some, like, I'm playing a lot of samurai games, how some samurais you can go into a different stance and different move sets are available. Imagine if you could cast like a spell that made other spells available to you while you were under the influence of that spell.
Yeah.
That concept is very interesting to me.
I think that there's a lot more that can be done with spell components and an optional rule set. That would be really nice. I also think too that you, again, in this optional rule set, you can even do things, because I brought up the idea of for DMs who want to limit magic in their world and they don't really know how they can do that creatively. This optional rule set could also have a whole section of magic disadvantages. So say for instance, like everyone loves fireball, right? You don't want to get rid of all magic, but you really want to make sure that you don't just want people just blasting fireball and ruining your campaign. So what if you had what if you put in the mechanic that that you see in some movies and TV shows, and some pop culture will show this, but magic having a bad side when you use it, but not necessarily to the player, right? Because not everyone wants to play with magic and have it like degrade their character and everything. But let's say, for instance, you have like fireball. Let's say that every time you cast fireball, 1d6 pounds of rations turns to ash. Like that you or your party are carrying, right? Or 1d6, 1d6 pounds of rations in a 10-foot area of the spell, like, you know what I mean? Like, so little things like that where you can make magic as fully available as it currently is, but at a cost. And it doesn't always have to be the player's cost, just a cost around them. And that cost could be the tool that this book, this alternative rules could have, to where it's like, here's a spell and here are 3 alternate ways that you could have a disadvantage. So you're less likely, basically what's the opposite of an encouragement? You know what I mean? Like you're basically telling your players you shouldn't do this unless you really have to. I think that could be a lot of options. Yes, so many tangents as usual, but that's what happens when you have good ideas for us. But yeah, no, but again, like highlighting the fact that you put in there a material component that turns into another material component. That's just a phenomenal idea. I really like that. I think that should be more prominent with D&D spells.
Agreed.
Okay, so you mentioned we have this oxidized metal powder now. So he did give us a few things. So it is an ingredient. It's powder. It's uncommon. So 2 pounds comes down into 1 ounce of this oxidized metal powder, right?
Okay.
Oxidized into a fine powder and then weight 1 ounce. Okay. So the description, when you use pieces of metal armor as the component, the leftover oxide powder can be used as a component for other spells. Alternatively, as an action, it can be thrown or blown into the face of a creature within 5 feet of you in an attempt to blind them. Pocket sand. Always gotta love pocket sand. The creature must make a DC 12 Constitution saving throw. On a fail, it becomes blinded until the start of your next turn, or until it spends its action rubbing the powder out of its eyes. On success, nothing happens. Man. I like that. I almost kind of wish the powder did a little bit more than just blind them but I guess it's not really magical powder. It's just now a dissolved piece of metal. So it's basically just...
And you kind of get it for free every time you cast a spell. So
yeah, so it is just a pocket sand thing. Like, that is kind of cool, though. I do like the fact that you threw that in there. Just like, by the way, you can just throw it in their face. I really am curious, though, if you have...
By the way, let me add pocket sand.
What's that?
I said, by the way, let me just add pocket sand to D&D.
I think Dovd always had pocket sand, because you can control it. So pretty much you all
did. Listen, he's a vendor, man. Like, he's got to have it.
Yeah. So yeah. So I really like that he threw in the whole blinded them. I want to know, Cosmic, do you have spells in mind? Do you have homebrewed spells, or are there already spells that require an oxidized powder that you know of that this is just helping produce the component for? I'm really interested to know if we're going to see these submitted as homebrew review at some point, these spells that use this oxidized metal powder, or if there's already ones that I'm just... Because I personally rarely pay attention to what components are needed, because unless it's a rare component or it has some sort of lore or roleplay value, like I said, D&D doesn't treat components good enough for me to bother with them.
Right.
But yeah, Cosmic, let me know. I'm really curious if you have any ideas for what to use this oxidized powder for. Okay, so yeah, so I think this is a very well balanced spell. I'm having a hard time, like, again, it doesn't really need any changes. It's not really imbalanced one way or the other. I looked it up a while ago, and there are some canon spells that use powdered metal in some form as a spell component. That's nice. Okay, so yeah, so it already leads into some canon spells, which is nice. I'd really like to know if you end up creating spells specifically for this, because that would be cool. Like, you know what I mean? Like a package deal where it's like, learn this spell, and this spell will create a component that it's the only way that this component's created for this other spell, right? Or basically, in order to get this much oxidized, metal this quickly, you'd have to basically like have like 100, swords or shields rusting in the sun to scrape off enough. Versus this does it instantaneously, right? Like there's a lot that I think that you could do here with adding that. So yeah, so it's very interesting. I think as a reaction spell, I think it's well balanced. I find it very interesting that once activated, you can use it like 5 more times. I like that it's not just a one and done, because I feel like if it was a one and done where you just get to use this once per, spell slot or whatever, I feel like it would be a dump spell, right? Like once you reached like level 5 or 6, you wouldn't be using this anymore. The fact that once it's activated, you're kind of, it's going to be useful is really good. I think it scales well with your level. As you progress up, you're going to get more, it's going to become more valuable. Even though it's going to slowly fall away from you in value, it's still going to keep up to some degree. And the fact that it has a material component exchange is also really nice.
Equivalent exchange, man. Where's
right.
That? Yeah. That is that the whole thing? There's nothing else I missed.
That was it.
Hopefully, I know Cosmic will let me know. I do my best to translate these the way people brought it up. I usually don't change any verbiage. I just organized it. But yeah, hopefully that does it justice.
Cosmic, you have anything to add? Any final thoughts or notes for us to contemplate?
Do you have any thoughts you're thinking so far as ratings?
I'm thinking. I'm definitely trying to look to go through it.
It's definitely very creative. I like the concepts that it brings.
Yeah, it definitely is. It will get the inspirational point for sure, just because it definitely leans into the missed opportunities of spell component usage. So I'm definitely going to give it the inspiration point for that. It's just not something that High Point needs, but it is really good. It is really good. If I did take it, it would need some changes, though. Not very many, but it would take a couple changes. I think we're going to give this one a solid 8 out of 10.
8 out of 10 looks clean.
It was a close 9. It really was a close 9. I think the only reason why I had to kind of knock it down from a 9 is it is a little bit. It's mainly because of the Shrine Maiden aspect, because that is kind of a larger part to it, and because that's not mine, I can't really take it.
Oh, because it's so specific.
Yeah, it's a little bit too specific there. It's really good. I can't, like, again, the balancing that I would do for High Point would only be lore wise, and it would only have to just fit a little bit a few other aspects. but I really wouldn't change much of it if I were to use it. So yeah, 8 out of 10. That is absolutely solid. I like that.
That's what's up. That's beautiful.
I also so okay, and then he even did mention that it does change from a divination to from evocation to divination when used by the Shrine Maiden as well. So I do like that that change up as well.
Interesting. Very interesting. Okay.
Artificer, wizard, warlock, sorcerer, druid,
Let's see.
I almost wonder, would it be worth it to have the wording change to where the standard gets hit by an attack and the Shrine Maiden is upon taking damage?
Oh, to add even more versatility specifically with the Shrine Maiden.
Right, kind of like what we were talking about before with the breath weapon, right? So in particular instance, a Shrine Maiden could use this to protect against a breath weapon because it is a divine, it's a divination spell, so it's in a different class of spells. They come with it naturally. It is powered by their deity. So I don't know. I could see an argument being made again if you wanted to kind of tweak the Shrine Maiden side of things, maybe even let the Shrine Maiden just protect against any damage taken versus normal people using it can only do it with attacks. Maybe that might be good.
Interesting.
I don't know if you saw the chat earlier. Cast a spell on an ally. The effect applies to every hit they take for the duration, including from extra attacks. Whereas when you use it on yourself, you still need a concentration check on every hit you take. Arbitration, since it's a defensive spell, I don't know all the spells at 10. So hang on a second. So I don't know if you saw it in the chat earlier, but when you cast this spell on an ally, its effect applies to every hit they take for the duration. Oh, I think that was when you were talking about if someone has multi-attack. So this is supposed to survive a multi-attack. So this will technically survive multi.
So say that one more time.
So Cosmic is saying that the effect applies to every hit they take for the duration, including from extra attacks. Whereas when you use it on yourself, every attack is done. You still have to make concentration checks. But yeah, so once you do this,
that's crazy. So basically, how this works then is in that situation, we cast this on a person to protect them from a single instance of damage. And then that protection remains on them for all incoming damage until...
so is that the thing? So is that what you're saying, Cosmic? Is that once you've cast this on you or your ally, does it stay with that choice for 5 rounds? Is that what you're saying? Is so again, if you and I are standing there, I take damage, you cast this on me for the next 5 rounds, I'm continuously protected by it, or is it for 5 rounds you can continuously choose?
That's what he's saying.
That's why it's a concentration spell. Interesting. Oh, that's okay. I thought this was once I cast it, I'm just able to continuously help my allies or myself. So, that does kind of change it a little bit.
So then I would ask, do you re-roll the D4s every turn? Or is it you roll it at the instance that the reaction occurs, and then that's the same reduction for every attack from that point forward?
Or is it total? Yeah, because if someone's doing a multi-attack, I wouldn't think that you're getting every individual attack a 2d4 off of every individual attack. I would assume it's a 2d4 off the total. So so even though you have multi-attack... I would still say, I would say that if you're doing 2d4 off of every individual attack off of a multi-attack, I think that Babakis might be right. That might be a little bit too powerful. I think that if someone does a multi-attack on you, after all of the hits happen, you take this off of the total amount.
So the total number of damage that you receive in that turn can be reduced by this amount until the spell ends.
That's what I think is a better balance, because the idea that it's, I mean, again, because you're also thinking like early fights, you're probably not going to run into anything that has more than a double multi attack. But even if they're doing a 1d6 or a 2d6, being able to take 2d4 off of every swing, that does feel very powerful for a second level spell, especially for 5 rounds. So one person, you or the other person. Now, granted, if it's you still have to make your concentration checks on every hit, but that does.
He did say that the concentration checks are the reduced amount. So if I reduce the amount to like 5 every time, then I only have to make a DC of 10 for every one of those checks, which could be hard. I mean, especially if you're making a lot of them, then eventually it's way more likely that you're going to fail one of those checks. But you cast it on somebody else, then you never have to make a check, because they do have to be within 5 feet of you. So yeah, I guess you do kind of have to be up there.
Yeah.
But.
And that's why you didn't want to have the normal 1 minute duration. Because I think the 1 minute duration would have been very long. I think having that long for a 1 minute. But you're also right. Having this for only a single round makes no sense, because then it's just a reactionary spell one time. Yeah. I don't know if I won't change. I mean, I wouldn't change the score of it, because it doesn't change my mind. It just more solidifies the fact that it's an 8, not a 9, if it's supposed to go after every attack. Because I even think at second level, that's too much. I think being able to individually go after every attack roll is a lot.
I think I would at least a 4th level spell or higher.
Yeah, I would say that, just again, if you're getting attacked per round, one initiative roll of worth of damage, I guess you could say. But yeah, that's well, because would it be better if it said when you were I'm trying to think of it, because it's still supposed to be a reaction, right? So I don't know how to resolve it verbally, like, because I don't think saying that, even something like all damage taken this round is reduced, like, I don't think that makes sense either, because essentially that would just be like temporary HP, right? Like, this is supposed to be damage reduction, but I'm having a hard time resolving how this would work with multi-attack, and how it would justify every swing of a multi-attack being 2d4 at a second level spell.
Would your original assessment not be effective in that scenario?
Which one? What do you mean?
So originally you said that the way that this spell would work is that at the end of whatever's happening, like.
That's what I'm saying. I don't know how to say it verbally. The thing is there. Like I said, I think it would just be the total damage you take off of that attack.
It's you collect the damage that you've taken since the end of your last turn, and at the beginning of your turn, you reduce that amount of damage by whatever the spell says. So it's like, hey, I just finished my turn. Now this guy attacked me. This guy attacked me. This guy attacked me. This total of 50 damage. I am going to now reduce it by 2d4 at the beginning of my turn, and then I take my turn. And at the end of my turn, the same thing repeats for 5 rounds.
See, that doesn't really work that much. Let's see here. See where you're coming from, but a lovely 2d4 base damage reduction using 4th level spell slot seems too high cost for too little of an effect. Well, that's where it's like that's where this one gets really interesting. Because it's really in the wording, right? I love the concept of it.
I was just going to say, if we're using the example that Bobicus gave earlier about the Pit Fiend, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Pit Fiend has 5 attacks, and each one of those attacks does an average of 20 damage, right? At third, if I cast that at third level, then that's 4d4 that I get to reduce, right? 4d4 is a maximum of what, 16 damage?
Yeah.
So I'm able to take roughly, with a third level spell, take almost no damage from a Pit Fiend.
Like if you both maxed out, he would only max out at 4 damage each swing. Instead of what, 40 damage? He said he had 4 or 5 strikes.
Correct. He's got 5 strikes at roughly 20 damage each strike.
So he has up to 100 damage that he could dish out.
In one round of attacks. And that's just from the Pit Fiend. Now if I use a third level version of this, which does 4d4, that's almost, and see, maybe a third level spell's okay, but that's a Pit Fiend, man.
What's the CR of a Pit Fiend?
CR 20.
Wow.
That's pretty crazy. Is this it? Yeah, CR 20. The dude's got 300 hit points. Got a natural armor of 19. It's technically got 24 hit dice, which is supposed to relatively give it a level of about 24. Like the number of hit dice is generally related to your level. So this CR 20 is like higher than a level 20 character, supposedly.
Yeah.
They got a strength score of 26, con score of 24, int score of 22, charisma of 24. Like, the majority of their stats are over 20.
Yeah, so a third level spell basically being able to negate. But then again, that is their standard attack, and this would be a full-on spell negating that. But then again, it's negating it for 5 rounds. Like, it has 5 rounds to just sit there and bitch slap the Pit Fiend. Granted, this is one example, but,
It's fair.
Now, granted, from the point of view of, like, again, from lore-wise, I could see something like a Shrine Maiden or something special being able to hold their own against a Pit Fiend for that purpose. It's only on one person, and it does require concentration. So it's not just like it's a buff that they just get, right?
Yes, and that's very true.
And it's really difficult because it's like you don't want to make a ruling that makes it too powerful for low levels, which is what I think the problem is right now, is 2d4 per hit at, level 3 or 4 seems like a lot. But then again, when I'm level 15 or 20 going after a Pit Fiend and only one person on the battlefield can handle its standard barrage. Remember, this is only helping with the Pit Fiend's standard barrage. Is that really OP, or is that just leveling the playing field? Because one player has a chance to stand up to it. Basically, you're adding another tank for 5 rounds, and that's all you're doing. And that's if you keep up concentration. And that's if you roll really, really well. Because those 2d4 could instantly be 4, you know what I mean? Like 4d4 could instantly also just be 4 points.
Yeah, and that's very fair. So, yeah, that's definitely a hard one. It's definitely a hard one. I don't have a strong opinion or the other.
And I remember too is because okay, so let's see. I mean, limited at once per reaction. Oh, you mean like the person using it? So if it's cast on your ally, the ally has to use their reactions. Is that what you're saying, Babakiss? Like, so it would still use. So even though this is active for 5 rounds, it can still only be used once per round for a barrage of attacks. So
I actually kind of think that's kind of cool. Like,
because in a really weird case of 2 Pit Fiends, you wouldn't be able to do it twice in the same round. You'd be able to survive one barrage of the Pit Fiend, and then if another Pit Fiend came up, you wouldn't be able to survive their barrage because you've already used your quote-unquote reaction to use this spell. So that might be interesting. Cast the spell as a reaction.
you saying that when they use their reaction, they'll use it for all of the attacks on that one creature?
I think so. I think that would how I would do it.
Okay.
Oh, so
No, I
Babakis
can
is just
see
saying
that.
no.
It's
No,
like, hey,
Babakis just still thinks it should just be one attack, regardless of anything else. He thinks it shouldn't. It shouldn't benefit the multi attack. It should only be one attack.
so yeah, that's going back to the way we originally thought. Well, I originally thought the spell was working.
Yeah.
Because that's what I initially thought is like, hey, for 5 rounds, I can activate this with my reaction.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. But I mean, even if
To
it's
like
on someone for 5 rounds,
yeah.
and because again, we're also thinking too, it's like not even the multi attack, but it was a reaction to cast it. It's on someone for 5 rounds, and every time they get hit, this is gonna trigger for 5 rounds. So if you were to cast this on your tank and literally throw him in the middle of battle, the idea would be for 5 rounds, every single time he takes a hit, it's going to be reduced by 2d4. So, putting it into a different perspective, right? Like, let's say you're fighting a bunch of minions and you throw your paladin in the middle and then cast this on him. Like if you're right next to him and then you can cast it. If you can walk away, because once it's cast upon him, it's just concentration. So that's another thing too. Cosmic, does concentration get broken if you move past 5 feet? That would be another thing too, because if you have to stand next to the person you're concentrating on, that also could make a better balance, right? Because then you can't just walk away and let them literally be in the middle of the battlefield.
And that's interesting because, especially because with how the spell is working, it makes you set it up so you have to be next to them. And it's also a reaction. So, generally speaking, this is not a spell that you're going to plan to use. You're going to use it in response to something else. So, if I'm just responding and reacting, it's not like, oh, let me just set this up and like come up here, cast the spell on you, and then walk away. It's just, I got to run up there and I got to wait. Because reaction spells, as far as I am aware, you don't get to just cast them whenever you feel like it. Like I don't think I could just cast shield willy nilly. It's a reaction to a thing.
Yeah,
So
I
if
think
have to be reacting to a thing,
yeah, I think it starts to get really messy. Okay, so Cosmic says you don't have to stay within 5 feet of your ally that you cast the spell. It doesn't have special concentration rules compared to other spells. And I think that's also, see, I think we're getting into the area of now it's too OP because if you can just cast, if you can do this as your reaction to cast it and then walk away from that ally and they're still protected, and then again, it's every single attack that comes after them individually for 5 rounds. Yeah, I'm starting to think I'm starting to think that the original idea of you have to cast it as a reaction, but then you cast the spell, so you have to, you burn a second level spell slot as a reaction to cast this. But for 5 rounds, you get the benefit of this spell without having to recast it, right? Like, because that's what we were talking about, where for 5 rounds, the caster can continue to use their reaction every round to reduce a single attack.
a single attack, like Bobicus was saying.
Yeah, I think because that was the original assumption we were going off of, and the more I just keep rereading this, I think the moment you try to like put this onto someone else and then have it like follow them, I think is where it gets a little bit weird, because the range and everything, being able to walk away from them gets a little bit weird. And the idea that it's basically, because I mean, really, if we reword this and if we change some of the wording here, basically what you're doing is you're casting shield upon somebody. That's really all this is a shield. That every time they get hit, if it's successful, they get to reduce the damage, and for 5 rounds. Now, granted, it is only unsuccessful. It's like it has to be a successful hit, but I mean that makes sense. It's not like stopping people from hitting you; it's just reducing damage. So, a level 2 shield that follows you for 5 rounds with concentration, that protects you against every single hit that comes against you. Yeah, that does sound OP for a second level. And I think what's also coming down is it may just be a problem with the balancing between the die roll that he's chosen, and the level, because he's made a good point. Making this a fourth level spell, but with only 2d4 doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But with the way that the spell's reacting, 2d4 seems like a good balance, but at the same time, the rest of the spell seems overpowered. So maybe the problem here is either the level or it's the amount of die that you're damage reducing.
What if you changed the spell to just do 1d4 instead of 2d4 and kept it the way that Cosmic intended? It happens for every single attack, an entire barrage, but we cut the spell's effectiveness in half. So it can still reduce a lot of damage over time because it's happening on every single attack. It's just not a lot of damage. So it would be at second level, you do 1d4. At third level, you do 2d4. At fourth level, you do 3d4, or something like that. But for every single attack, it would do that much, right? So in the Pit Fiend's case, he's going to do, it wouldn't be as effective on massive hitting monsters, but it would be way more effective on mobs, right? If you're getting attacked all the freaking time, right?
Right.
So that, if you have like a bunch of like zombies attacking you, you could basically like wade through them and like wade through all the mobs. But if you have like a Goliath, 1d4 is not going to stop a freaking Goliath's club or something like that, So unless you cast it at much higher levels.
Yeah. I think part of, now that I'm again constantly reading this, I think maybe another issue, if it's not the die, because it's either the die or the level, it may also be the fact that we're thinking of this as a reaction, right? So the fact that you cast it as a reaction, but again, then it's just like an active shield. In my opinion, the way that this is working for 5 rounds, would this not just be better as an active, an active spell, just something I intentionally say, hey,
like
you,
sanctuary or something like that?
Yeah, like, hey, you, for the next 5 rounds, every attack against you, you're reducing its damage. Like, that's basically what this is doing. Maybe we're being tripped up by the fact that it's a reaction, because then it's like I'm casting this spell as a reaction, but then it's just a shield spell, right? So maybe it's just confusing there. Because I'm trying to figure out like why it worked for us before and now it's kind of not working, and I'm just wondering, is it just because is it too much damage it's reducing? Is it too many attacks? Is it just not the right level? Or is it just doesn't belong as a reaction? You know what I mean? Because I think if casting time is a reaction, but it lasts for 5 rounds, my mind says that the reaction is still coming from the person that cast the spell, which is why I think we initially thought when you cast this, you, the caster, continue for 5 rounds to be able to negate damage on yourself or others in your vicinity.
What I thought, yeah.
And that's because when you say casting time is a reaction, I assume that continues with those 5 rounds of concentration. But then again, it also doesn't make much sense. If you're concentrating on the spell, how are you reacting? So
you're not recasting it,
Exactly, right? So I think that maybe where we got tripped up too is if you're casting this as a reaction, but then it lasts for 5 rounds, is that really a reaction spell, right? So yeah,
what I was thinking, because I didn't think of too many reaction spells that have a duration other than instantaneous.
Well, and also think about what concentration means, right? Like you have to be concentrating on the spell. It's kind of like, in my opinion, it's a spell that needs like a constant like mantra or something to keep going. But this was done in a reaction. So you're telling me that my buddy got hit and I just flipped into this mantra spell that I'm just going to keep going mid-battle all of a sudden? That's the other thing too, is using concentration requires like mental preparation. I don't think you would just react to a spell and then keep a spell going. Maybe that's again why it's just not.
Here's a question. If you did use it as a reaction, hypothetically, inside of a fireball, and you cast it on your buddy, you'd have to make a saving throw right away because you're still taking damage. You're protecting them, but you're still taking damage. So you'd have to make your concentration saving throw potentially before it's even useful to them, because you're taking damage the second you cast it.
That's true.
Right?
So here's the other thing too. Okay, so here's another problem with this. I just realized there's another problem with this. Well, no, it's not a problem because it only happens the one time once you've cast it. So once you've cast it, because yeah, it's basically, yeah, because once you've cast it, you've used up the part of the shield, it disintegrates. That's the caster doing it. But then, yeah, you're basically just giving someone a 5-round shield of damage reduction. But it can't go below 1. So yeah, you're just reducing damage, which can't negate damage.
Yeah, and it's saying I can't make it like 0, so you're still gonna take some damage. So if you only have 1 hit point left, it's not gonna help you.
I wouldn't say, Cosmic, I wouldn't say so much that reaction and concentration are contradictory, but again, and this just, guys, please be understanding, this may just be pedantic in the way that Kage and I look at DMing because we just approach our settings a little bit differently. But, you know, when I look at, I don't say the reaction and concentration is a contradiction. It's more that if I'm in the middle of battle, a reaction is something I'm reacting to in the moment. Oh, boom, like, you know, counterspell. Oh, it's something I can just like, you know, shout off right. You know, it's a command word. I can shout it off. I can do it in the moment because I see it happening and it's a, you know, it's a reaction. Whereas a spell, especially if it's one with concentration, I imagine, you know, you cast a spell, you say the words, you do the hand motion, you fire the spell. But for concentration ones, I don't think concentration is you just, I got it up here, guys, I'm thinking about that spell, don't worry. You know what I mean? It's not like you're just in the middle of battle doing a million other things and it's like, oh, nope, that spell, back of my mind. You know, I imagine that part of that concentration is like keeping your hand up, keeping them within focus, you know, having to mutter something. So you can still move and, you know, like defend, but you still have to be doing something, which is the taking your concentration, right? I don't think it's just don't worry, guys, I remember that I'm holding that spell. It's more of a
little bit of an analogy is like, imagine somebody throws a basketball at your face. Your reaction is going to be to either block it, to punch it, to do something instantaneous to it.
Right.
You're not going to react to that basketball by catching it and spinning it on your finger, right? If you want to spin a basketball on your finger, you have to pay attention enough to be able to keep that thing going. You might be able to avoid somebody trying to knock the basketball off your finger while you're spinning it, but you're still going to have to focus on spinning that basketball.
Yeah. Right? So I'm not saying, yeah. So it's not so much a contradiction as it is, I don't imagine someone reacting in the middle of battle to someone being hit, casting the spell, but then keeping that spell going in that exact moment, right? It just, those two things don't seem to match when you think of a reaction and then going immediately into concentration, because that to me would, to me in a battle, that should infer some debuffs to that character, because you have all of a sudden all of your focus is getting that spell off and this situation over here, right? Whatever you were doing is now no longer on the front of your mind. So that's, I think, just another thing is like, it is interesting. It's a fantastic idea to have a reaction spell that has a duration, but I don't know if it makes sense, because again, you're basically as a reaction casting a spell, and the intent is to give someone a shield that lasts for 5 rounds as long as you're concentrating, that reduces damage on any and all attacks they take. And I think that just when you compile them all together, as I feel like that's where we're starting to feel like it doesn't balance out. All of the pieces balance out individually, but once you really start to put every single attack and it follows the person, I think that's where it starts to, something has to give, whether it's a higher level, the die roll needs to change, or something I think just is causing this to not quite sit perfectly.
I do think changing it to an action would help out a lot. I do understand the reactions, because, like we said at the beginning, there are not enough reaction spells. Like, I looked it up earlier, and the only ones that I could find were the 3 that I mentioned: Counterspell, not Vicious Mockery, Counterspell. Well, Vicious Mockery is one. What was the other one that we mentioned? Absorb Elements.
So, okay,
like
throwing this out there. So taking it as we've talked about it, because it's a reaction from someone who either has this spell or the Shrine Maiden. What if this was a cantrip that was a reaction cantrip, so it can only do it 1 per round, and it did 1d4? Like, even if that was able to, I'm just trying to think of, like, again, I'm just trying to make sense of, like, why doesn't it work, right? Like,
where you're going with
I made it 2d4 instead of something like 1d7.
If that were the case,
possible, that it still lowers the DC by at least 1. Simultaneously too strong and too weak. Yeah. What's up?
I was thinking, because cantrips technically scale with the caster's level as well, so it would already innately have what do you call it? It would automatically, like, go up with the caster's level. So that cantrip at 5th level would do 2d4. That cantrip at 10th level would do 3d4, kind of like that.
Yeah, so the cantrip could automatically level up. That could be a thing. Yeah, I'm just okay. So going back to it, because we really liked it, because what we thought was you had to wait for an ally to get hit, then you can cast this spell to reduce the damage. That was what we originally thought was going to happen, and then we assumed that the caster would then have 5 more rounds to continue doing that. And we don't have a problem with that. The only problem that we really had was letting the ally walk away with it, and it being every single attack. Those were, I think, just the two main issues that really derailed us, right?
Those are the heaviest parts, yeah.
Okay. So I think that without having to just, like, dissect this, Cosmic, I honestly think that keeping it with the caster, not making it a movable shield, I think can be step 1. Because if it's not a movable shield, if it is literally, it's a spell coming from the caster, but it's the caster, I kind of imagine it like you've cast this spell, and it's almost like you get 5 uses of intercept, like, or not intercept, but it's a spell we were talking about earlier, interrupt spell, right? Like spell interrupt.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's kind of like, in my opinion, it's almost like that. It's like you cast this as a reaction, and for 5 rounds, you basically get a interrupt spell for damage for you or an adjacent ally for the next 5 rounds. And it would only be for just 1 single attack. I think that is the version that sits the best. I think it becomes complicated when you allow it to walk away with the person that you're trying to protect. I think it still needs to come from you, because, again, going with the reaction, it's almost like you're using magic to stop the damage from happening, not that person, not the target. You are the one stopping the damage with your magic. So I still think it should be with you. I think that helps it. I think that really solves the casting time and the duration. And in terms of the overpoweredness for 2nd level, I think we're just in conclusion that the idea that it's every attack that you can do this to, I think the idea is that it should be based on your reaction every round. So again, you're using your reaction every round to use this spell to negate damage. And in that particular case, if you're doing it that way, I don't think we need to mess with the 2d4. And you can even make a case that, it should be scaled by 2d4 for every level, because at that point, if you have that spell slot open to react at a higher level, again, you're the one stopping that damage when you're reacting. And I think that makes a better balance, because then you may have the spell active, but you may have used a different reaction on a round, so you may just miss a round. So you still have the spell active, but you didn't get to use it because you've already used a reaction. So I think that makes me feel a lot better if those were the specifics.
Okay. Yeah. I'm here for that.
Yeah, I think the idea of range, so self instead of touch. So yeah, I think the idea of, because you wanted to keep it for 5 rounds, being range of self. So you cast it on yourself, you are now imbued as the Impenetrable Warrior. Which I know maybe the name of it doesn't quite fit that, but I imagine the way that the spell would work is you cast it, you as a reaction, and it's almost like you have like a shield made of magic that you like, again, move over to your buddy or move in front of you to block some of that damage. But then because you've cast that spell, you're now basically holding that shield for 5 rounds. It's almost just, again, you've summoned that shield, and then for 5 rounds, you or anybody that's right next to you, you can, as your reaction for 5 rounds, just nope, 2d4 gone, nope, 2d4 gone, nope, 2d4 gone. For 5 rounds, you can just do that as long as you have your reaction that round.
I kind of like that.
I think that makes the most sense.
Really
That, because
like
again,
that.
that is the original way that I was reading this, and that makes perfect sense at a second level. It makes sense for the scaling, and I feel like especially because, again, if you put into the Shrine Maiden concept of, at a certain level, the Shrine Maiden can even use an enemy's like materials, like that makes it feel a little bit better, and it makes it more useful for the caster. Like, I think it involves the caster more.
Would you be comfortable giving maybe, I don't know, at higher levels, a little bit added range on that reaction that they can do? So instead of them being within 5 feet, maybe 10 feet, maybe 15 feet at a certain point?
Yeah, actually, yeah. Because of that, I don't see why, even just saying that with every spell increase, so with every level spell up that, or every upcast, I don't know why I have a problem with that. Every upcast adds 5 feet. Why not? Because again, it's a magical shield that you can extend out to your buddies. So at low levels, you're only casting this at second level. You're only going to get your buddy right next to you. But beyond that, you can go 10 feet, then 15 feet if you're upcasting it. So not only are you getting further range, but you're getting more damage reduction for that time frame, right? Hell, I would even say for every upcast, you get an additional 2d4, an additional 5 feet, and hell, you could even say you get an additional round if you want to. I mean, that might be a little bit OP because you're upcasting, but I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, that could make a lot of sense. I think really where it derailed us was acting like it was a shield you put on someone and defending against every single attack. I think those are the only two things that derailed us. But that's my opinion. Like I said, that's my opinion. If I had to say like my real thoughts, the version I just described, the stain with the caster, being able to just, with your reaction for 5 rounds, do all that. That version is the version that I had originally given the 8 out of 10, and that's what we're going to keep on the list, because I don't feel like everything we've talked about, even the derailing, should change that. But if I were to take it as Cosmic has tried to write it, in terms of like the damage every single attack is reduced, I'd probably have to knock it down to a 7, just because that takes it further away from what I could accept in High Point. So it doesn't make it worse, because I still like the spell. I think it's a fantastic spell, and I think it's touching on areas that D&D needs to work on. But if we go with the version I originally assumed it was, that's the 8 out of 10, and that's what we're going to keep it as. But if we keep it at it just stays with the person and every single attack is reduced, I would have to say that would put it further away from being usable in High Point. So that would just make it go down to a 7. Because again, it gains point, it wouldn't lose any more than that, simply because it's also super creative. It's solving a lot of problems. It's inspiring me to consider doing things with like like magical components. So it gets a lot of bonuses, but I wouldn't be able to accept every single attack. I'd have to definitely change that to, one attack. But I do like the idea of, I love the idea that Kage brought up of increasing the range. That sounds fantastic. Because I mean, why not, right? Like it makes perfect sense. And then if you tied this in, if you're Shield Maiden, like imagine having like a pole arm and then having Sentinel. So it's like you could either stop damage or re-attack an enemy, with your reaction. Like having both of those types of reactions in the battlefield being able to like reduce damage or reattack could be super fun to play those together.
Yeah. I like that.
And then even I think there's a lot that could be said for this spell. But it just, again, it's all dependent upon how you would want to approach it in your setting, because different settings would have different settings would be able to approach this a lot differently. So we'll call this an 8 out of 10. So what does that bring? What does that bring his average to? If that is his 8 out of 10. Ooh, his average, I'm pretty sure his average should be about a 7 to 7.5. He has some of the highest scores, but I know that he's gotten a couple, like, I think he's gotten 1 or 2 5s. I think once maybe he's gotten 1 5 and 1 6. So he might be at an 8. He might be at an actual 8 as his average.
Take again.
He's probably gonna have the highest average.
Oh, so that's what I'm gonna have to do. I'm gonna have to separate out the first digit of these in order to get a true average. But let's see. Give me a second. I think I can answer that for you.
Yeah, last time it was a 7.2, so I think it's only going to go up from there. So you definitely probably have closer to 7.5 or 8.
Oop. 2. I mean, he's definitely the only one that I know of that. See, where's it? AP. There we go. Average. Hold on. Acting a fool. Why are you saying that? That is weird.
Is the math not mathin'?
It's giving me like an error for whatever reason when I try and calculate it. And I'm like, it should not.
I don't have it up in front of me, so.
Well,
it's got to be over 7.2, but.
It definitely is.
Because we'd have to.
I don't want to. Wish I knew how to. What you were telling me earlier about Excel versus Google Sheets is really true. I could do this so easily in Excel.
I know, right? That's the problem. So we have the leaderboards on Google Sheets just so we could both mess with it and check them out. But it does kind of suck that it's just like we're both highly we use Excel in our daily lives and in our jobs. So we have so many things that we do naturally that just don't translate perfectly to Google Sheets.
Like so close, but it's just not the same. So he has 3 8s. He has 3 7s. Actually, I wish I could average this out way better. He's got 4 6s and 1 5. And then he's got a 9 and a 10. So yeah. I would say his average, it looks like, is a 7.
Yeah.
Maybe like a 7.5.
Yeah. Well, if last time it was a 7.2, and I don't think he's gotten anything less than a 7 since then. And then with this 8, definitely bumped him up. So, yeah, Cosmic, you've got to be 7.5 now.
7.5, if not 8 now. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Man, you were probably gonna rock that leaderboard for a long time. Pays to get in early.
He's just longevity over a lot of other people since he's been with us since the beginning.
Hey, you got to get him in early if he gets them all in, and he has. You're just gonna flood the market. But I mean, again, it can't just be a bunch of crap either. I mean, he was the first to get a 10, so.
Right, that's very true.
So it's like, good stuff comes from good sources. But yeah, no, that was fantastic.
Exactly.
That was actually really good. I do like some of the tangents that we went off. I think those were some of the better tangents and some of the more well thought out tangents that we've had. They stayed mostly on topic, and they were good. They were good, solid aspects of D&D that I think do deserve to be explored more. Maybe one day I will work on a table.
Yeah.
What's that?
I said a lot of those tangents were stuff that I honestly think we can do like full topics on, you know what I mean?
Oh
Like that can
yeah.
actually get expanded and stuff like that, action economy, all kinds. But no, that was very good. I always look forward to seeing Cosmic's items.
Yeah, Cosmic, to
I
answer your
love
question,
Cosmic.
just because I like continuity and because of future thinking for episodic purposes for the stream. To answer your question, I probably want to see the Shrine Maiden next since it was directly tied to this one. So I always like to think episodically of tying
I
those
love those
in.
connections
So yeah, being able
for
to do
sure.
that sooner than later while this is still going to be fresh on our heads, because if we do this months later, we may not make the same connections. So that's my choice. I would do the
Fact.
Shrine Maiden next for us. But yeah, no, I think this one was pretty good. Unfortunately, we weren't able to have Kage in the studio, unfortunately. But yeah, that's all right. We still have
Next time.
Discord. Hopefully, we'll be able to get video figured out here eventually, so he's not just a gray and dark screen you see right here.
Yeah. And Abacus, I think if you're asking about your item that you just submitted, I think we're gonna add that to the queue and
Oh,
run that on one of our
were we
future
able to get that
streams.
fixed? Was he able to get into the
Yeah,
submissions
he
page?
posted. He was able to post it in the submission section of the Discord. So
Awesome.
it's in there, and I'll go ahead and turn it into a write up, and that way we can do an official review on it.
Okay, nice. Cause yeah, if we can get that, yeah, if we can get that done, cause I think we only have what, one or two more on the list right now. I think we have Inventurology has one more for
Well,
us.
we have the entire Goblin army. Um,
That's going to be its own
that's
thing. I don't
that's
think that's
that
going to
we're gonna
be a
have to
regular
figure out
homebrew
how we want to
review.
do. We technically have the portable pilotable spider tank from Invent.
Right.
And then we had two more submissions from him. I'm sorry, one more submission from him. It was a mimic of some sort, it looks like. And
Oh,
we
that's
have the
right.
Heliopia submission.
Oh, do we? Okay. So
Yeah.
then let me look here real quick. We have so many submissions. Jesus Christ, guys. You guys are awesome, by the way. Thank you guys so much. I
Yeah.
love that you guys, like, again, it's not just the idea of being able to get content, like out of you guys, but it's just being able to see how you guys play and just being able to share this with you guys and see you throwing stuff at us so we could actually like talk about it is just it's awesome. I love it and I hope it continues. Okay, so let's go here. So Inventurology, that one's done. That one's done. That one's done. So we do.
Unless you checked off the Heliopia one, as in we did that already.
No, that just means that it's
There,
approved to be on the list. That's why the
got
Goblin
it.
ones don't have
Okay.
the check mark yet because they haven't. We have to go through those. So really, we have the
Got it.
pilotable spider tank. Um, we have Hoilepa's magical item, and we have another from Adventurology. God, Adventurology and Cosmic. You guys just flood us. So what I think we're gonna do chronologically is you had questions on the pilotable spider, right? For Adventurology.
I got those squared away, so we should be good for that.
Fantastic. So I think right now, as the chronological order sits, we have the spider. So next Monday will be Inventurology's spider. Then the following Monday after that will be Hoilepa's magical item. And then we will
I got it
then
right.
do Baba Kisses because for the sake of new people's items. And then we'll be back on Venturology's Mimic.
Yep. Sick.
Excellent. Well, actually, wait a second.
That was very productive. I like that.
Yeah, because we did the Sunbeam Revolver. Before that, we did Kintsugi's. So, but we did do Inventorology's Titan. Then we did Drabs.
Yeah, we did the creature.
And then Cosmic. So you know what? Can you make a note here for me? Because we do have 2 new people, we're going to bump Inventorology. So instead of Spider next week, let's do Hoilepa's next week instead of the Spider. So we'll do Hoilepa's magical item. Then the following week, then we'll do Babakis. Then we'll circle back to Inventorology. Because he did just get one, and he's had a couple before. Oh, wait, no. Was that his first one? No, wait. No, that was Inventorology's first. Okay, hang on a second. Hang on. Sorry. I got to look up the... How many of it has Inventorology given us? Is it just the one so far?
Let's look.
You have... I think you... Yeah, you're controlling that one. Because we might not have to. If he's only given us one... Oh, he has only given us one. Okay, no, never mind then. We're fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so next week it'll be the Spider. Then it will be Hoilepa. Then it will be Babakis. Then it will be Adventurology's Mimic. Yeah. That's the next 4 weeks. So we have 4 weeks worth of homebrew. And then we'll probably, by that time, we will probably have had a chance to go through the Goblin Army or the Goblin Village, whatever it is. And that we will probably tackle on a special, like that'll be like its own, like dedicated. Probably won't be, I don't know if it'll be a Friday or a Monday. It'll probably be a Monday, but we'll probably maybe either do that on a day that we can like do a longer stream, or we'll figure out something, because that's going to be a big discussion. So we're gonna plan a bigger stream for that one. But yeah, I think that works out. I think if we do Inventorology, Hoilepa, Babakis, Inventorology, and then definitely by then we'll have Cosmics, probably next ones come in.
Got you.
All right. I think that looks good. Too many people to keep track of. Yeah, we are still working on how exactly to coordinate all of this. Most likely what we're going to have to do is have 2 versions of the leaderboard. One that's the active current version, and then one that's the list of chronologically upcoming. That'll probably be a lot better for us. But yeah, we'll be figuring this out. It's a work in progress, guys, but you guys are making it easier. You guys are making it just really nice for us. So we thank you for that. That's always a nice thing when you guys are participating and just, helping us out. It really, really does make a difference for us. Having you guys in chat, having you guys in the Discord, it's fantastic. Speaking of the Discord, I'll go ahead and pop the link one more time in chat there. So if you are in chat, go ahead and join us on the Misfit Gamers community, where you can share your ideas, or you can submit ideas, topics that you want to have us talk about, questions that you have for us, or even your own homebrew submitted items. You can get that to us as well. If you are on YouTube, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button if you did like what you see. If you didn't, go ahead and leave us a comment and let us know what we can do better. We would like to see you on Twitch if you can, because that's where the chat is and that's where we get all of our crazy conversations. But otherwise, that's going to be us for today. Hope you all had a great weekend and a good start to your week. We will be back on Friday, 7:30 Pacific Standard Time, for the next live stream of D&D discussions. I don't think we have a topic just yet. I don't know if we're going to circle back on a previous topic or if we're going to come up with something new this weekend, but we will keep you guys posted. But yeah, that's going to be all for me.
Awesome. Deuces, my friends.
All right, guys, you take care. Have a great rest of your week.